This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? There we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. Jason's engineering the broadcast. Thank you, Jason. At GCN. I'm Vincent Finelli. If you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call. 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Gwyneth is with us live in Australia. Welcome, Gwyneth.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
I'm doing really well. Really well. And I got your emails. I want to apologize to you, Gwyneth. I have been unavailable, been working on the farm away from the landline. And when you call, I'm not here. So I wanted to say I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'm not offended at all. I understand that you're busy. Just sometimes I think, I'm doing my own farm work, and over here when it's it's around about like sometime between 9 and midday, 9 in the morning and midday, and I'm out doing my own farm work, and I get a train of thought begins to happen, and I said, gosh, I've got to mention that to Vincent. And then I rush inside and get on the telephone because I think that it would be quicker to say what I need to say on the phone rather than sitting and writing an email. So that's just how it is. But usually I ended up writing a long email anyway. But that's just how it is. And this is when I'm doing my farm work, I don't know how it is with you, but that's when things occur to me. That's when I do my thinking.
Yeah, shovel therapy or tractor therapy, right?
That's right. Horse breaking therapy. I'm busy doing a repetitive, training system with a horse. We've got to do the same thing like 10, 20 times over. And, you're watching the horse, you're watching its responses, but then it's sort of repetitive and you're getting to thinking, and you're thinking about everything else as well.
Right.
That's what just how I am. But you're right, it's shovel therapy as well. And it's horse manure clearing therapy, all this sort of thing, mucking out therapy. Yep. Yeah,
cleaning out the stalls. Yeah. So that's what it's like on the farm. It's back-breaking work, and it's repetitive work, and it's do it over and over and over again. And with me in the tractor, if I'm baling hay, I'm going around in circles. And then when I'm done with that field, I go to another field and I go around in circles. And I go to another field and I go around in circles. And then if I'm mowing for the hay, I mow around in circles. And then if I'm raking, then I go around raking in circles. And then when I go to bale, I bale in circles. That's the way it is. And, it's repetitive, and there's the drone of the engine, the hum of the engine, the roar of the engine. And, not necessarily a constant speed, but almost. And your mind wanders. You're absolutely right. And that's when I think about things that, it's kind of like meditating in a remote way. But I understand you've got a new horse. I got your email about that. You want to tell us about that?
Yes. This horse is about the same age as my other horse, the horse that I had at first, but it's been broken for quite a few years. Okay, so both horses are about 6 years old, but the horse that I bought earlier on this year that I've broken myself is only just broken, whereas the other horse got broken in about 3 years ago as a 3-year-old, and it's been working for about the last 3 years. And so it's had a bit more work to do in its life. And with horses, I'm of the opinion myself that you really shouldn't break a horse before the age of 5 years old, because that's when the cartilage in their bones hardens, that's when they can be considered to be really properly fully grown. So that's the reason why when I saw this 6-year-old unbroken horse come up for sale, nobody wanted it because everybody thought that it was too old. And it was on the market actually for about 6 months. And I kept coming back to it, and eventually I said, actually, I really like this horse, so I went to see it. I called up the lady and I went to see it, and this was the first horse that I got. And that's when I bought that one. But I've spent about, since last March, breaking it in, and I thought that it would be a good idea to get a second horse for a number of reasons. One that was properly broken in. For one reason, I could take it out with rides with my newly broken horse, with my son and I riding it, my son riding the fully broken in horse, and me riding the newly broken horse, so that the horse that's been broken for a longer time can teach the newbie what to do. Okay? It's like dogs. If you've got more than one dog, the older dog will teach the young pup what to do, just by virtue of being around and saying, yeah, this is how things run here, you know, and this is what you do. You know, he feeds us at this time of night, and then, you know, you got to be on your chain, or, you know, you got to be in your kennel or in your run, and then when the sun comes up again, then he comes and gets us and lets us out again. You know, dogs, somehow, chickens, all livestock, cattle, you'll find that the older cows teach the young calves what to do. And that you really, these days, probably when you first got cattle, you needed to teach them your routine. But these days, you probably don't have to teach the young calves your routine because the older cows teach them. And that's, from what I've seen, that's the way it is with practically all livestock animals, everything from chickens to horses and cattle and everything in between. But like I say, the other reason, well, I got the other horse as a horse for my son to ride so that we could go for trail rides together, and to be a mentor for my more recently broken horse, and also to be an emergency backup. In case one horse goes lame, then you've still got another horse to get about on, you know, and this is it. And the fourth reason why I got this horse was she's broken to harness. She's a standard bred, and she's broken to harness. And I really do like the idea. I also do driving with a horse, you know, with a carriage as well, or a cart. And so I like to drive sometimes. So the fact that this horse was also broken to harness as well as to saddle was another plus. But she had her own set of problems in that she had developed the habit of being lazy, which means that she's not forward moving. She's the very opposite. But as far as I'm concerned, that's probably a good problem for her to have. Because my other horse, Lily, is very forward-moving, wants to go, but it's going to be good for her to have a horse that's not so forward-moving, to learn that there are other gears between 2 and 5, if that makes sense, Vincent.
Yeah, and you mentioned cows, and, you know, class, you may not have a farm right now, and you may not be interested in horses, but what you learned is that, you know, you don't want to break a horse immediately. Okay, you just learned that. So you got that in the back of your mind, so that if you decide to get a horse, you know, a year or 2 or 10 years from now, that's in the back of your mind. And when Guineith was talking about cows, we have what's called a lead cow. That's the cow that is in the front of the line, and the other cows follow the lead cow. And what's really nice is at our farm we have many pastures and many fields. And when we call the cows, to a specific gate, they know what's next. They know exactly where we're intending on taking them. And we don't have to take them there because they know the routine. And it's been learned for years. And you're absolutely right. The older cows teach the younger cows the routine. And, some of them are, independent. Some are like USA prepares cows and they go off and do their own thing and they, they get lost. But, some of them are stubborn, but for the most part, they understand the routine and it makes it really easy for us. They know that the grass is greener on that other pasture or that other field where we're going to take them. They actually can anticipate our moves. They can wait. Well, a lot of times they wait at the gate because they know it's been 2 days or a day and yeah, it's time. It's time. The grass isn't as good because we've eaten it all down. And I know the family is going to come and let us go over there. They know that. And, I was thinking about your horse. And would you mind sharing with us about what the horse cost? If you don't want to, don't. But I just wanted to put this in perspective.
Yeah. You can get horses for a very inexpensive price. But you've got to be aware that you have to take the time to put into that horse because probably it's going to have some problem or other. With this new horse that I've got, I mentioned that the problem was that she was lazy. She was not forward moving at all. And so I'm having to work with her now to encourage her to go a bit faster. And that started when I was on my trial ride. I got on her and I kicked her up and she did not want to take even one step. But within 5 minutes, I had her trotting up and down the laneway. And that's just how it is. Now, because of that, she cost $350. Which is
okay, so if you divide that out, that's about 25 cents a pound glass. So what can you get for 25 cents a pound? Not too much, right? You can't get candy for 25 cents a pound. So you can get hay for 25 cents a pound, or actually less than that. But there's not much that you can buy in this world for 25 cents a pound. And that sounds like a wonderful bargain, if you're prepared to feed and care for the horse. Yeah,
but like I say, if you're going to pay $300 or $350 or $500 for a horse, you've got to be prepared to learn how to educate that horse to be the sort of horse that you want it to be, because it's not going to be a riding school pony. It's going
and
to
when
have
we come
some
back,
problem or other.
When we come back from this break, can you tell us about what the price of a decent, usable, quality saddle is? I'm not talking about something really fancy. I'm just talking about something that is serviceable, usable, and will last, 20 more years. Something like that, a general purpose saddle. We'll be right back with Guineith. Guineith Isaacs is with us. She's live in Australia. She's a farmer. And she lives on an off-grid farm on acreage in Australia. No electricity from the grid, no water from the city water company. She takes care of all that herself. She raises her food, raises animals, and she gets up in the middle of the night and broadcasts with us on Wednesdays. Guineith, what does a saddle cost? Now I'm talking about not a brand new one. But, let's say a quality, let's say you get a horse that's 4, 5, 6 years old, and you decide that you want to get a saddle. What would a used saddle cost? One that's serviceable, one that, you can use for general purposes around the farm.
Okay. Second-hand for a good quality leather saddle, you would be looking to pay around about between $200 and $500 for a second-hand, reasonably good quality saddle. Now, that said, I've got 4 saddles here. Okay, and you might think, well, why do you need 4 saddles? One of them is a pony pad. That's a saddle for a pony. Okay, because I might get a pony one day. I don't know. The other one is called an Equitech saddle, and that is synthetic. It's made from that, that cheap leather look-alike plastic stuff, and neoprene, which is wetsuit material. And that is called a synthetic saddle, and that is if I need to take the horse into water. But it's kind of cheap, it's sort of a bit grungy, and I don't use it very much. But the other 2 saddles are both of the same kind of saddle, and one of them I bought for $50, and the other one, I think that the other one was actually on the farm when I got here, but they're both the same make and model, slightly different, but they're both from the same maker, and they are from a maker called Sturben, which is a Swiss and German saddler. Okay, that's Stubben, and the model is Siegfried. So they are 2 Sturben Siegfried saddles, and you can look them up on the internet. That's Siegfried. And the Sturben Siegfrieds have been made for around about the last 40 or 50 years by the Sturben Manufacturing Company, and I think that the ones I've got are between about 30 or 40 years old. Now, they're very, very high-quality saddles. The Sturben company is that's like the Mercedes-Benz end of the saddle market. Okay, but they tend to be, let's just say they're German manufactured and Swiss manufactured to the sorts of standards that German and Swiss people are accustomed to. And Sturben, since World War II, has been manufacturing saddlery equipment for the German army. And so this is the type of quality saddle. One of these Sturben saddles cost me $50. And it's like anything. If you keep your eye out, you can get bargains. But normally, if you wanted to buy a second-hand Sturben saddle that was maybe 20 or 30 years old, you would be paying between $200 and $300 for it. So that is, that's about what you pay. But if you want to go the course of buying a new saddle, for a good quality leather saddle, you'll be paying at least, well, for the very basic end, if you want a leather saddle that's made in India, okay, then you'll be paying about $500 for it. If you want a Swiss German made, like a new Sturben saddle, then you'll be paying between $1,200 and $1,500 for it. And it can go up from there. You could pay $10,000 for a saddle if you wanted something that you would be happy to take to the Olympics. But really, for farm functionality, probably somewhere if you wanted a new saddle, somewhere in the range of $500 to $1,500 would be satisfactory for you.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. So, Guineith, it looks to me like, based on what you've said so far, that we could buy a horse and a saddle for less than $500. There's some other things that we'd need, but the main expenditure would be the horse and the saddle, and it can be done for less than $500. What are your thoughts about? I've looked at images of the saddles that you're talking about. Some saddles have a horn on them in the front, and you can put a rope on them, and some don't. What are your thoughts about a saddle without a horn? Because we have 2 saddles here at our farm, and they're Western saddles, and they're probably 50 years old. They're well used, quality, high quality saddles, but they're really used. I paid about $100 each for them. I don't have a lot of money in them, but they have horns on them. You know, that part you can grab in the front. That would, if it were an animal, it would be a short horn. What are your thoughts about with versus without a horn?
With is definitely better. But I've just always ridden using, I think I've ridden in a Western saddle once when I was about 15 years old. I found them to be extremely comfortable and almost impossible to fall out of. Okay? But mostly I learned to ride using what you would call an English saddle, and that's mostly the saddle that I have used since then. But I would say if you are learning, and if you're in America, I know that there's a lot more Western riders in America, then, a horn is definitely useful, especially on a young horse, because it gives you something extra to grip onto. And sometimes young horses or newly broken horses that have been broken for less than about a year, they can do some really silly and unpredictable things, and they can change in an instant in their behavior. And I would not recommend anyone who has never ridden a horse and never owned a horse, I would not recommend you buying an unbroken horse and thinking you could break it in yourself. Okay? When I bought my horse, because I had a time when my previous horse died, and I had about 6 months when I didn't have a horse, and then I brought Lily, who was the unbroken horse that I just broke. But if you are going to break in a horse, you're going to fall off. That is baked in the cake. That horse is going to do silly, unpredictable, stupid things. It's going to do things like spook and buck and, kick and all the rest of it. Before it learns that it's just got to settle down, and there's the trail, and you've got to ride on it, basically. That's the job. But, there's that window of time before they settle in and really learn what they're supposed to do, where they're going to do a whole lot of silly and unpredictable stuff. And if you're on such a horse, then a horn is something else you can hang on to. The other option is if you have an English-type saddle, you can get what's called, some people call it a monkey strap. Some people call it a bucking strap. Bucking because it's something you can hold onto if your horse bucks. That's, and a lot of rodeo riders have bucking straps attached to their saddles. And there's usually a set of D-rings at the pommel, which is the front of the saddle, on either side. And you, buckle the one side of the bucking strap onto one D-ring and then the other side onto the other D-ring. And then once again, it's something else that you can hang on to. But yeah, I would say that Western saddles as a saddle technology are far superior to English-type saddles. But the advantage that English-type saddles have is that they are better for when you're riding cross-country, okay? So doing things like going through rivers, down valleys, over hedges, jumping your horse, and doing things like, dressage and this sort of thing, then that's when you need the English saddle, because the Western saddle is great. You probably, like I said, it's pretty hard to fall out of a Western saddle, but you don't have the freedom of movement that you have in an English saddle, okay? Now, the Australians, God bless them, they came up with a compromise, and that is called the Australian stock saddle, okay? So, which basically happened around about, 100 or 120 years ago or whenever, when some Australians got a hold of a Western saddle and decided that they could adapt it to their own uses and put a horn on an English saddle and make the flaps narrower. The flap is the thing that hangs down where your leg would sit. And on a Western saddle, it tends to be quite thin or absent, and you just have the stirrup leather, which is a lot thicker. You know, it might be 4 inches wide in a Western saddle, 3 or 4 inches wide, the stirrup leather with the stirrup hangs on. But on a English saddle, it's usually only about 1 inch wide. Okay? But the Australians found that they could do this hybrid type saddle, which was had more or less the body of an English saddle, the freedom of movement of an English saddle, but incorporated things like saddle horn and smaller saddle flaps, you know, the flaps at the side. I'm not sure if that's the right name. I've never been to riding school. I learned how to ride at a trail riding place where I basically helped them with their horses with the chance to ride occasionally. And so I didn't have proper riding lessons, and I didn't, you know, they probably weren't the best behaved horses either. So I learned how to ride a variety of different horses. But this is it. If you want a good hybrid type saddle, where you've got something to hang on to at the front, but you've got the freedom of movement that an English saddle affords, then try and see if you can get a hold of an Australian stock saddle, although I don't know how common they are in America. You could probably order one on eBay if you really wanted to. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Yeah, it does. And where we are in Missouri, we are west of St. Louis, and St. Louis was the jumping off point to head west in the United States into the Wild West. I'm talking about the 1800s, the early 1800s. And if you're in Missouri and you go from one little hamlet to the next, you'll find that they're about 10 miles apart. Guineith, would you tell us why these little towns, little stopping points, are about 10 miles apart?
Yeah, because if you are riding a horse, okay, you'll find that after about 10 or 15 miles that your horse will start to get a little bit tired, and that you might have to stop for an hour or two to give your horse a rest before you continue. And as well as that, if it was during the era of the Pony Express, they would have to change the horses. So, and usually a post office would get built there, because, you know, if you were swapping the mailbags over, you might as well, you know, divide out the post for that area. And so you would find that you would, you know, you'd have the Pony Express stops about 10 or 15 miles apart, because especially if you're riding the horse hard and fast, you'll find that that horse will start to really get up a sweat after about 10 or 15 miles. There are exceptions. I used to have a standard bred retired harness racer, and he had won about 6 races in his day. He was a really fast horse, and I'd actually met people who won money on him and who recognized him. But he could canter 40 kilometers, and he'd be pretty tired at the end of it. He would need about 3 hours just to rest at the end of it. But I would canter him into 40 kilometers, that's about 30 miles, and then, you know, he would have his rest, and I would, you know, go and do my supermarket shopping, and I would, you know, maybe have a cup of tea and a pie and some lunch and sort of visit some friends and all the rest of it, and then I would canter him home. This was in harness. So, but he was an exceptional horse. he wasn't your average run-of-the-mill horse, and he was the one who died. He caught his leg in a fence and did damage to his leg, and I had to euthanize him last year. That was sad because he was a really, really impressive horse, and I was very sad to lose him. But this is the other thing that you've got to take into account with horses, is sometimes they have injuries where they are not going to heal, and you will have to put that horse down, okay? And like I say, that's the other reason why, especially heading into the time that we are heading into, that I felt that it would be really beneficial to actually have two horses here in case something happened to one of them. And they can get things like colic, which is they get wind in their gut or they get sand in their gut, and that can kill a horse in a day unless you know how to treat it. And, you know, this is the thing. If you don't know how to treat it yourself, you've got to call a vet in or the horse is going to die on you. And the horses are something where it takes really a lifetime of being around horses to really get to know horses. But you've got to start somewhere. And if you're going to start somewhere, probably the best horse to start with is a horse between around about 15 to 20 years old that has been there and done that. Not necessarily the fastest horse on the block, but one with a good nature that has been in work through its entire life and is now middle-aged, maybe heading into old age, but still got a few productive years ahead of it that you can, that you can really learn to ride on, okay? And that is a better idea. You're going to have a better horse riding experience if you start with a horse like that and get your own balance and your own horsemanship right with a horse that is not going to provide you with too many problems straight off the bat. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Yeah, it surely does. When we come back, can you tell us what does a horse need? So if we want to buy a horse, what do we have to care and feed it? We'll be right back. Guineith, you mentioned colic. We had a dear friend and neighbor who had a horse for many, many years. It was an older horse, and it got colic, and it was down. And we were called to try to help get this horse up. And we tried, and we couldn't do it. Our son was there, I was there, another neighbor was there, and the owner was there, and we all tried, and it was too late. It was too late. We couldn't get the horse up. And ultimately, the horse died. And it's really quick, as you said. And then the next thing that happens is you bring out the backhoe. You dig a hole in the ground, and you bury the horse. And it takes a backhoe, because horses are pretty big. And it's a real sad, sad day. It was just a terrible, terrible situation. But you're absolutely right. So life and death are part of being on a farm and owning farm animals. Our cows sometimes die. Sometimes the calves get attacked by coyotes. And so it's, we're on the edge of life and death all the time. All farmers are. We're not special. It's just part of being a farmer. And so what we're talking about horses. What is involved in the care and the feeding of a horse? What does it cost? What does the horse need? What kind of shelter? How much water? Can you leave them around, just for a few days without going to see him, or do you have to see him and talk to him, and do they have to be part of your family every day? How does that work? Okay.
That varies a lot depending on what type of horse you have. Horses vary from animal to animal in how much they eat. Okay. There's particular breeds that have a reputation for being hungry. I'm thinking particularly here of thoroughbreds and other hot-blooded varieties. So they can cost, maybe they can easily eat their way through $100 worth of grain and chaff and hay in a week. One horse. That's a thoroughbred. Okay? But funnily enough, other hot-blooded horses are nowhere near as hungry. So if you get an Arabian, because they are bred from, hundreds of generations of horses that basically lived in the Arabian desert. So although they are a hot-blooded horse, I'll explain what hot blood means in a minute, by the way, so don't sort of worry too much about that now. But although they are a hot-blooded horse, then but they don't have much of an appetite at all. And you'll find that horses that are bred from wild stock are usually not very hungry. They usually can get by on hay, and usually they can stay and work when they're just on hay. Although Arabs, you'll find that they will need some grain if they're in work. But if you've got a Mustang, or if you've got one of the, European type of wild-type horses that have been domesticated. So if you're in England and you have something like a New Forest pony or a Connemara pony or a Shetland pony or a Welsh pony, all of those are bred from wild-type horses, okay? And so you'll find that they can get by on hay. And the horse that I have, the first one, Lily, the one that I just broke, she is a Whaler Mustang cross. So Australian wild-type horse crossed with American wild-type horse means a horse that is really good-looking, but hasn't got much of an appetite at all. And she will eat, if she's on grass, at the moment she's eating one wheelbarrow full of hay a day. If she's stabled, she'll eat 2 wheelbarrowfuls of hay a day. And, that is generally how it goes with, horses that have a wild-type genetic, okay? But if you get horses that have been highly bred for many generations, so maybe things like I said, thoroughbreds, horses like Morgans, like Tennessee walking horses, and so on, I've found that standard breds are a mixed bunch. Some of them are really hungry, and some of them can get by just on hay, because they're a funny blend of racehorse and cart horse. So some of their appetites go towards the racehorse end of things, which is going to be expensive to feed, and some of them go towards the cart horse end of things where they can live on hay. You've really got to make inquiries when you buy the horse of what it's being fed, because you'll find that every single horse is different. Even within a breed, you'll get some horses that are hungry and other horses that can live on grass or hay alone.
We're going into we're going to the top of the hour break. When we come back, can you tell us a wheelbarrow? Is that how does that relate to a square bale of hay? How much is it? Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Class, there are 3 USA Prepares instructors who live off-grid. Guineith Isaacs lives off-grid, generates her own electricity. Rich Sheben lives off-grid, generates his own electricity for his farm. And we do. Now, our system is I can switch it at the push of a button, literally, to go between on-grid and off-grid. So depending on load and what is most economically viable, I may switch to being on-grid. But I can tell you this. We have been off-grid, end-to-end broadcasting with Guineith Isaacs for years. So the electricity for her end is provided by her system, and the electricity provided for our end of the broadcasting here in Missouri is off-grid. and we've been doing this for years. So just want to let you know, we probably have the longest running off-grid broadcast in the country. So I just want to share that. Guineith, we're talking about hay. How would you relate a wheelbarrow full of hay? Now, I guess that would be loose hay compared to a square bale, which was compressed, compacted hay. And the current price of a square bale of hay in the United States is about $4. And they range between 40 and, let's say, 65 pounds, depending on how large or small the farmer wants to make that bale, because they are adjustable. So how would you relate that? So how much does this horse eat in terms of square bales?
Okay. I have fed square bales in the past. I don't anymore because it's not economical for us here. Here, square bales cost between $12 and $20 for a square bale, which is just not doable. But square bales in the past, when I was feeding out square bales, it was 4 biscuits. If you've had anything to do with square bales, you know what a biscuit is. They tend to come in slices, right, throughout the bale. And some bales have 12 and some bales have 16 biscuits. But 4 biscuits is 1 meal, either morning or night for a horse. So it will eat generally around about 8 biscuits a day, about 4 in the morning and about 4 at night. Okay, and you'll find that if you tease out the hay in those 4 biscuits, you will get around about a wheelbarrow full of hay. And could I discuss the topic of feeding horses grains here?
Sure,
because,
sure.
Like I said, some horses need grain to maintain their weight, okay? If you have to feed your horse grain, you will find that your feed bill goes way up, because around here, from the farmer, grain for a sack of barley, that's 30 kilograms of barley, that's about 50 pounds of barley, costs around about $15. And I don't feed barley to either of my horses, but I do feed it to the chickens. And so I still have to buy it. But barley is a good grain for horses because oats, they do something to a horse that it's called in horse terms heating the blood or heating it up, okay? And what that means is it puts so much energy into the horse's system that the horse doesn't know what to do with it. And it makes it go faster. That's why they feed oats to race horses. But it has so much energy, it's like a child on red cordial. But this child weighs 500 kilograms, or how many pounds would a horse weigh? I'm not used to dealing with pounds.
Well, typically, let's say 12 to 1,400. They can go to 2,000.
Yeah. So that's what oats do to a horse. It's like having a 1,400 kilogram child on red cordial. Okay? And that's, you can direct that energy in a proper way. You can gallop the horse for, 5 miles a day every single day, and it'll be fine. It'll burn that energy off. But if it's standing around in the paddock with a whole lot of oats in its system, it's going to make trouble. And if you're just riding it, just doing some jumps or, herding some cattle or whatever, and you're feeding it oats, it's going to not be burning up all that energy, and it's going to go to its mind, and it's going to get that red cordial effect. And anyone who's had who's a parent knows what I'm talking about when I say the red cordial effect. That's exactly what it's like. But if you feed the same amount in barley, it gives the horse the nutrition and the energy that it needs but it doesn't heat it up in that same way. And another grain that you can feed, which was actually really popular in America around about 120 years ago, or 100 years ago, when people were still using horses as a part of their daily life, was you can feed a horse cracked maize. And they do well on cracked maize. And I've fed cracked maize to my own horses many times. The difference is barley tends to put on muscle and cracked maize tends to put on fat. Okay? But it is a good energy food and it is highly nutritious. But these days you might not want to do that in America because most of the maize is GMO. But if you can find maize that you know is not GMO, then it's going to be a good thing to feed to your horse. Now, with regards to preparing the grain, a lot of people who have horses will just get the grain and they'll, they would maybe 2 measures or 2 quarts of grain into a bucket and they'd just take it out with and they'd have the hay and then they'd just put the grain in the feed bucket next to the hay. That's what a lot of people with horses do. I don't do it that way because I learned something from reading and study, and that is that a horse, if it's fed raw grain, will only digest 10% of the grain. It'll only digest 1 out of 10 of those grains that you're feeding it, and the other 9 grains will go straight through its digestive system and will be excreted in its poop. And they'll grow in a paddock. If you want to sow a paddock with grain, any grain, you feed the grain to the horse poops in the paddock, then you harrow the paddock to, break up the horse poo, and you'll get a whole field of that grain that you want to grow. Okay, barley or whatever, oats or whatever. But if you want the horse to digest almost all of the grain, then you soak it for 12 hours before you feed it to the horse, or 12 to 24 hours. So this is the routine. You get the grain and you feed it that you've soaked for 12 to 24 hours, and you feed it to the horse, and as soon as you come back in from feeding your horse, you put the next grain on to soak. And then by the next day or the next feeding time, some people feed half the grain in the morning and half at night. Other people feed the whole amount of grain at the same time. It really doesn't matter to the horse. It's all the same. But like I say, if you soak the grain for at least 12 hours before you feed it to the horse will digest almost all of the grain, and that will save your feed bill, and it will mean that, you're not wasting a lot of grain there. Well, the grain's not really wasted if the horse poops it out into the paddock and then you harrow the paddock and then your paddock is sown in barley or oats or whatever. That's not really wasted, but in a way it is, but that's, and that's how it is. And your horse will absorb more of the nutrients and will have a vastly improved condition if you do it that way. But like I say, not many people know that trick. Most people just feed the grain to the horse raw, but they're wasting 90% of it.
Some farmers seed their fields that way with the cows. They feed the grain seeds into the cattle feed, and the cows spread it around. And it's done a lot here in Missouri and Arkansas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so we're talking about in Australia, if a bale costs that much, like $12 a bale, that's an enormous cost, and you're looking at roughly $6 a day in hay to feed one horse, and that's from now on. So the minute you get that full-size horse, you're looking at feeding at least that much in hay per day, $6 a day, $42 a week. Now, in America, it's a little less expensive and until there's a drought, and then the cost of hay goes up again. So the price of hay is directly related to the supply and demand of hay. And what happens is when we have a drought like we just came out of a drought. We had a couple of days worth of rain, so that put an end to the drought for right now. But we had no rain for months, and hay was getting more and more in short supply, and the price was going up. But now, the grass has turned green because we had 2 days of rain and, like 2 or 3 inches of rain in a couple of days. So the grass recovered very quickly. So that's what it's like being a farmer. And I really appreciate what you've been teaching us about horses, because I don't think a lot of us really thought that we might have to rely on horses again. Right now we're looking at, the top of the hour news was that Ford was going to lay off over 1,000 jobs at their corporate headquarters in Dearborn, Michigan. It just came out. Large companies are laying off. The economy is grinding down. There is absolutely no question about it. No question. And if you think that you can buy as much food as you want now, that's not true. And one other little item to think about. They say inflation is just about 1%. That's absolute nonsense. And I'm going to tell you why. And this relates to the kind of discussion that we're having about horses. Because you might have to go back to horses to get there, from here to there and back. Well, right now, if you go to the store and you think, well, let's go get a gallon of vinegar. So you drive that 20 miles. If you're a farmer, you drive that 20 miles. You take that ride for 20 miles, and you find out that they don't have it. They might have had it 20 minutes ago, but they don't have it now. So now you go back, the next time and the next time. Now, how many trips do you have to make to get that gallon of vinegar? Well, you have to add that to the cost of the vinegar. Guineith is with us live in Australia, Guineith Isaacs. And we've been talking about horses. And one of the things I'd like to mention, Guineith, is that there's a television series that I really thought was fabulous. There are a lot of lessons in it, believe it or not. And it was from the 1950s, the late 1950s. And it's called Maverick. And one of the actors was James Garner, and he played Brett Maverick. And his brother on the television series was Jack Kelly, the actor, and he played Bart Maverick. And so the Maverick brothers would ride horses because this was set in the late 1800s. And if you notice, and I guess most people may not pay attention to this, but for the most part, James Garner rode the same horse episode after episode for years. And you can see the white spot, the oddly shaped white spot, on the horse's head. And so you can identify that horse. And so how important is it that, that horse knows who you are, Guineith, as the rider? How important is it? Because it seems to me that, I've seen James Garner just hop on that horse, and that horse, it was him. I mean, he's riding the horse. It's not a stand-in for him. It's really James Garner riding that horse. And that horse seems to know him and respond to him, and he can turn that horse on a dime. It's impressive the way he rode that horse. But it was the same horse, episode after episode for the most part. How important is that for the horse to know the rider and vice versa?
Oh, it's really important, because horses are herd animals, and when you are getting to know a new horse, okay, you have to establish your position as the herd leader, okay, and the best way to learn how to do that is to really watch how horses behave in the wild and what the herd leader does. Okay, because they live in social groups, and there will always be one horse in that social group that makes the decisions for all the other horses. And what you have to do is you have to get it into the horse's head that you are that person, you are that horse that is making the decisions for all the other horses. And I can't describe on this show how to do that because it's such a detailed topic. But if anyone wants to know how to do that, I can recommend that they start studying the work of a man by the name of Pat Parelli. That's Parelly. And he's an American, and he comes from a cattle ranching background, but his real love and his real talent is with horses, and they're humans. And this is the thing that he goes on about non-stop, is that you have to get it into your horse's head that you are the leader of the herd and that they have to treat you as such, okay? And you have to do that in a way that the horse ends up having a great deal of respect for you and looks to you for leadership, okay? And like I say, the best way to do that is to mimic what a lead horse would do in the wild. And yeah, like I say, that is it in a nutshell. But you can spend a lifetime studying this topic and still not know it all. Because I mean, I've been riding since I was 15 years old, and I'm now 45, and I'm still learning new things. And sometimes I just think, man, oh man, but don't let that discourage anyone, because you've got to start somewhere. And you will find that if you begin to ride and you begin to study horsemanship, then you will get to a reasonable level of competence at riding within about a year of riding maybe every day or at least 3 or 4 times a week. You will find that you are at a reasonable level of competence within about a year. But you will find that you will never ever stop learning about horses. They will always have something new to teach you. And that's the important thing. That, like I say, is you've got to start somewhere. And my key piece of advice...
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back. Reliable.
Guineith Isaacs is with us, class. She's our international correspondent in Australia. Guineith, you sent to me a couple emails, and one of them is about Melbourne. Do you want to share with the class what your thoughts are about that?
Yeah. There's a fellow by the name of Courtney Brown, and he has an organization called the Farsight Institute, okay? And I think it's www.farsight.org, and he does what he calls a future news forecast each month, and that's posted on his YouTube channel, which is just entitled Farsight, Farsight. And, oh boy, if you look at his September news forecast, which is on that YouTube channel, it really gave me chills. Literal, I felt cold after I had watched that, especially the last section of it. It starts about 15 minutes in. The last section of it, basically, I felt like I was listening to a future broadcast of all the things that were going to happen in Melbourne over the next month, because it's his staff. Okay, he developed this system of remote viewing, and he based it on a system of remote viewing that was actually developed by the CIA during the 1950s and 1960s through to the 1980s. But what he did was he learnt the system from another fellow whose name just escapes me at the moment, but he developed it so that it was actually more accurate. Okay? So he took something that the CIA that basically stole the idea from the KGB back in the 1950s, and then he improved it So now his system is actually better than the CIA system. Okay, and the CIA system was leaked and then later declassified, so he's not doing anything that he shouldn't be doing. But like I say, what he saw in his future forecast for September was he saw that there was an area where there was a dome-shaped building and there was a spire, a dome-shaped building that was adjacent to a spire, okay, that was adjacent to a bridge-shaped structure. Now, I used to live in Melbourne, and I know the middle of Melbourne really, really well. I used to travel through there to go to university absolutely every day of the week, 5 days a week. I would travel through the middle of Melbourne to get from where I was living to the university that I was studying at. And I did this for many, many years. I was at Melbourne University for 4.5 years. Oh, my gosh. The things that he was describing was the middle of Melbourne, and I could see it in my mind's eye, and I went, oh, no. And what he said was that there is going to be a bomb in this place. He didn't say the word bomb. He said massive release of energy triggered by a device, because you've got to understand this is how the remote viewing people, and it wasn't Courtney Brown himself that said it. It was one of his staff members that put out the report, because he gets a number of his staff members to do this system to see what is going to happen in the future. Like I say, using these protocols that were developed by agencies in America and in Russia. And he said that there was going to be an energetic release, a large energetic release from a device in this area, which had a spire right next to a dome-shaped building. And as soon as he said that, I said, oh, no. There's protests going to be in Melbourne this coming Saturday on the 5th of September. And the police, the Victoria Police, are very much into locking this down and shutting this down. And I believe, I know I've said this to you privately in conversations, I believe that sooner or later that these protests in Melbourne are going to get violent, and that the Victoria, I believe, I've got no evidence of this is just my intuition, but I trained as a psychic and I worked as a psychic for many years. My intuition is telling me that sooner or later the Victoria Police are going to start killing people. I'm not opposed to these protests, because I believe in the right to free assembly. But people, if they're going to attend these protests, they need to be aware that the tree of liberty is going to be watered. The tree of liberty is going to be watered by people's blood. Okay, like Thomas Jefferson said. It's really hard for me to see these things happening. On the inside of me, I just know that it's going to happen. It gives me cold chills to think of it happening. But if people are going to attend these protests, they have to be aware that they are going to get to killing people. Possibly the Victoria Police, almost certainly Antifa/BLM are going to get to killing people at these protests. And if anyone wants to attend, they need to bear that in mind. And that there will be nobody to call, because, the Victoria Police are probably going to be the instigators of the violence, and they're probably going to be protecting BLM, because, BLM are actually good for the Victoria Police, because they give a reason for Victoria Police to be there. They They go around and they do all this bad stuff, and then the people beg for the police to protect them. You know, that's how it's going down in America. And that's not right. Because if people did the old-fashioned American way of doing things, there would be no need for the police because everybody would be protecting themselves. This is something that people have forgotten. And it makes me angry, actually, when I hear certain people on the radio saying that we need the police. I'm not talking about anyone on USA Prepares. I'm talking about other radio shows, okay? But I hear people talking on certain other radio shows about how we need the police to protect us. No, we don't. We don't need the police to protect us. The police are not going to protect us. We need us to protect us. Because really the police don't care about you and they don't care about me. What they care about is lining their own pockets with their extortion fees. That's what they care about. But you care about you care about your farm, you care about your family, you care about your cattle, and I know that you will defend those things, your own life, your own family, your own farm, your cattle, everything you have, you will defend it to the utmost, using whatever means happens to be available to you. And I will defend my farm, and I will defend my family to the utmost with whatever means happens to be available to me. You know, there's nobody to call around here. If I get attacked by any party that happens to come along, I know that if I don't defend myself, that I'm in a very bad situation. And so I've determined that I'm going to do that I'm going to defend myself, because I would rather, how can I say this? I'm not ever going to be a slave, okay? If it came to a choice between me being a slave and me defending myself to the utmost to avoid me becoming a slave, I would rather defend myself and my family and my farm to the utmost to prevent myself from being a slave, even if it meant putting my own life in danger. Does that make sense, Vincent? I think I've said that right.
Yeah.
You know, but this is how everybody used to be.
Let me share with you a simple story. So I mentioned on the air that between our farm and Norm Shealy's farm is a little hamlet called Marshfield, Missouri. It's between our farm and Springfield, Missouri. So if I go to Springfield, Missouri, the direct route would be through Marshfield, Missouri. And for several years, like 3 years, the government of this little tiny city or town in Missouri hired a cop for $35,000 with the expectation that the ticket revenue would be $176,000 a year. So it was an investment. You put up $35,000, you get $176,000 back. That was what the mayor wanted to do. And I mentioned this, and they had an illegal ticket quota scheme that they would pull more people over than before this scheme, and the idea is they would bring in more revenue. Well, I happened to mention that on the air, and I was at the dinner table with the family and last night, and I happened to mention this story. And one of our boys said, "Oh, yeah, they pulled me over, Dad." And I said, "Why?" And our son said, "Well, now here's how it works in Missouri. You get your license plates, and in the center of the license plates there is an identifier for the month that they expire. So let's say it's month 4. So you have a number 4 in the center of your license plate. It's a sticker that gets replaced until they demand that you buy new plates. And then you get a new plate with a new sticker. So you put one sticker on top of the next. And they're color coded for the year. So the sticker, let's say, is month 4. And that means at the end of that month, the end of April, those license plates, the registration for that vehicle expires, and it should be renewed, and a new sticker put on there to indicate that you paid your registration tax again. Okay. So our son was traveling through Marshfield, Missouri, and he got pulled over by the cops, or one cop. And the cop said, "You know why I pulled you over?" And our son had no clue why. So the cop said, "Well, it's because of your license plate being expired." My son said, "Absolutely not. It doesn't expire until the end of the month, not the beginning of the month." And the cop said, "Yeah, well, you're right. But while I've got you here," the cop was leaning over like a homo might, getting really close to smell our son's breath to see if he could smell a hint of alcohol, which he could not. So, class, the reason I'm mentioning this Marshfield, Missouri situation, this illegal ticket quota system, so we've been talking about this for years, saying that there are ticket contests and there are ticket quotas. So a ticket contest is you pit one police officer against the others, and you say, okay, so we're going to have a contest to see who can be the most productive. Now, they don't say tickets, they say productivity. So whoever's the most productive gets, the gold star, whatever that might be. So I believe, it's my opinion, that the police are no more lazy or no less lazy than other people. They kind of want to be left alone also, and give them their own devices. They probably like to pull off to the side of the road and just watch the cars go by and not bother anybody. But it's the mayor. It's the mayor who says more revenue, more productivity. And that gets passed down to the police chief, and the police chief says, I ought to keep my job because I've got, the boat and the nice house and those kind of things. So I want to keep my job. So I got to tell the boys and girls who wear the uniforms, who are out in the street, driving around, to be more productive. So they become more productive by pulling more people over. So they have to have an excuse to pull people over. So in the case of Marshfield, Missouri, the excuse was, in our son's case, is, well, your tags, your registration for that vehicle expired this month. Well, it didn't expire yet. There was no lights out. There was no misuse or non-use of turn signals. There was no excessive speeding or failure to stay in the lane. There's no reason for him to be pulled over whatsoever. So what the cop did was have our son sit in the police car. And then the cop is leaning closer, like a homo might, to get real close. But the purpose was not to be a homo in this case. The purpose was to smell or attempt to smell our son's breath to see if he could arrest him on charges of driving while intoxicated. But he couldn't smell anything because there was nothing to smell. So he lets our son go. But the whole reason that he pulled our son over was because the mayor wants more revenue. So the cop has to find an excuse. Now, the general public is frosted with what the police are doing. Now, our son had to waste that time. And if he wasn't polite and well-behaved, and if he, if he wasn't polite, he probably would have been arrested. Something would have been made up. So you have to be polite to these thugs that impose their will and detain you because their boss's boss wants money from your wallet. Stolen money. The whole point of what I'm trying to say is that's why you see these protests. That's why you see the police cars on fire. That's why you see Black Lives Matter. That's why you see the Proud Boys and, the rest of these factions. Because all of them have one thing in common. They're frosted with the government's oppression and theft of our hard work, which can be denominated in dollars. That's what this is all about. And it's not just here in Marshfield, Missouri. It's all over the state. It's all over the country. And it's all over countries throughout the world. It's all over. And what about this woman who was arrested for posting on Facebook, Guineith, with, she was pregnant, and the police arrested her for a post on Facebook.
Yeah, if anyone wants to see what that's about, they should go to my Facebook page, Guineith Isaacs, just go on Facebook and just search for Guineith Isaacs. You'll see it because there's my little thumbnail or whatever is a highwayman mask, and it's got a highwayman masquerade couple at the top of the banner. That's how you know it's my page. Oh my gosh, a pregnant woman was arrested in her own home, and her husband in front of their children. Their children are absolutely terrified, saying, "Mommy, Mommy, what's happening?" In the background, you can hear them. And, because they were helping to plan this 5th of September protest, the Victoria Police must be really, really frightened of this movement, because they are really, really trying to stomp it out. But what they don't understand is when the people don't like the Victoria Police. They've had 150 years of oppressing the Victorian people. You can go back 150, 170 years ago, and the Victoria Police were going around the countryside on horseback acting like a bunch of thugs.
Guineith, one quick question. Quick question. Does this not start at the top? Does this not start at the top? Could the Queen stop it right now? Could the Queen say, "That's it, no more"?
Yeah, but she won't. We'll try
okay,
that
so
route.
class, what that means is it starts at the top with the Queen, and she could stop it. So think about that, and that's the same thing as in this country. It can stop with the president, the governors, the mayors. That's where it is. That's where it starts. Guineith, thank you so much for being with us. Guineith Isaacs in Australia.